release, like stress of some sort.
Jamie, go out and grab that painting that young guy sent. The guy who has a pineal gland tumor, who makes this really crazy tryptamine art. This guy,
yes, I've heard about
this guy. This guy sent me one of his pieces.
Yeah.
And he has a tumor. Do you know his name, Jamie? We'll find his name. I'll give this guy some love. But you look at his artwork and you go, oh yeah, that's what that is. You know, almost like Alex Grey stuff, but Alex Grey stuff is it's art. I mean, it's definitely representative of the tryptamine world. It's beautiful, it's fantastic and amazing.
Right.
But it's art.
Right.
This guy's stuff seems like a trip. Like, it's the chaos of the tryptamine experience is sort of replicated in his artwork. Yeah, that's it. And so this young guy, we'll find out his name. He sent this.
I first heard of this gentleman from. Holy moly!
Take a look at this.
Yeah, I first heard of this guy from John Ohia, who organizes Alex's
I don't even know which way is up.
Well, I don't think there is an up, Joe. I think this is a zero gravity environment. Up is any way that you want it to be. This is pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Wow.
Yeah, well, I'm waiting for we're building a new studio, and when that's done, we'll have this up prominently featured, but this kid's work is just incredible. Jamie, see if you can find it, who he is, but...
He should be, is he...
I hope he's healthy.
Letting himself be looked at by medical people?
I think he's just happy to be tripping all the time.
He's just going to leave it alone. What about science, man?
Sean Thornton is his name.
Sean Thornton?
Yeah, I got a...
Shout out to Sean Thornton. Yeah, there's his work. There it is. Artist got cancer of the pineal gland. His paintings will leave you speechless. Yes, they will. Yes, they will. Sean Thornton. Amazing. Yeah. His stuff is incredible. And apparently, he's at least in some sort of way anecdotal evidence that it's produced in the pineal gland. Of course, the Cottonwood Research Foundation that Dr. Rick Strassman is a part of, and his amazing work from DMT to Spirit Molecule, of course, the documentary that you and I were in.
Right.
His work has shown that it is produced by the pineal gland in live rats. So we know now for a fact that at least in that mammal, it's produced in the pineal gland. But that's always been for people that I went to the Vatican last summer, and one of the really cool things was the giant pine cone that they have in the center of like one of the outer areas.
Yeah.
And I was really lucky to have a very good guide who was a professor, and he was explaining to me that was representative of the pineal gland. And
Wow.
it was really fascinating because there's this enormous pine cone, and it's surrounded by these two peacocks on the side. They're supposed to represent immortality in some sort of strange way. So I don't know what that whole vision was supposed to mean, but he was very adamant that pine cone, there you see it up there on the screen, that is representative of the pineal gland, and also in ancient Egypt and a lot of the hieroglyphs you see that as well.
Right. Well, yeah, pineal itself means because it is shaped like a pine cone. Right?
Yeah.
That's why it's named that, but I had no idea. That is very interesting.
Yeah, it was pretty fascinating.
Yeah.
What it was also fascinating was this guy, although he knew that was representative of the pineal gland, he did not know that the pineal gland produced DMT. He wasn't even aware of what DMT was.
Right.
So he and I had this really cool conversation about it where he was like, what? With this crazy Italian accent. This is amazing. And he's writing things down, and I'm, telling him about Strassman's work and you and your brother and all these different things to look into. And,
Right.
There is while my wife was rolling her eyes, like, oh, Jesus, not this shit again.
You just can't be taken out in public, Joe. You always embarrass me.
Well, she knew as soon as the guy said pineal gland, and my eyes lit up, and I'm like, here we go. Let's talk about drugs.
Right. Well, there is a guy, a couple of interesting people to mention in this context. One of them is a researcher, a guy named E.D. Fresca.
How do you spell that?
Good question. E.D. Fresca, I think. I may have to correct myself on that. He's a pharmacologist and a neurochemist and psychiatrist, But he is the one that's really kind of leading the charge for endogenous functions of DMT and has good evidence, which has been, disputed by some. I mean, Dave Nichols is kind of on the other side of it. He's like, DMT doesn't have any internal function. All these people are deluded.
That seems to me to be really cocky.
I think that it's surprising that Dave, who's a very careful scientist, would have such pre-formed ideas.
Very rigid ideas,
yeah.
Right.
There's a conference in the UK at the end of June called Breakin Convention, which you may have heard of. It's like a psychedelic conference. Dave and Edie are going to be there. I'm going to be there, hopefully keeping them up. I don't want any fist fights or anything. They're going to be talking about this and doing a debate on it. Breakin Convention, you might tell people to Google that. That's a very interesting conference.
For sure. What makes Dave so confident? I mean, when you consider the potency of it and the knowledge that's produced in the body, and then also the knowledge of the effects of it, which are just astounding.
Right.
How could anyone say that for sure? Has he done it? Has Dave done it?
Of course he's done it.
So how the fuck could he do it and not go, okay, what is this?
Well, I think he does, but then there's also this very reductionist side to him, and and he basically, just as a pharmacologist, he says it's never going to reach, sufficient concentration in the plasma to have an effect. However, I think he's wrong, and I told him, I was teasing him, I was saying, I wrote back, that famous phrase Arthur C. Clarke once said, when a distinguished but elderly scientist says that something is possible, he's very likely correct. When he says it's impossible, he's almost certainly wrong.
Well, it's when you're talking about the just general biodiversity of human beings and how some people, let's talk about other human neurochemistry, like depression. Like, some people are super happy and have no problem with their dopamine or serotonin levels.
Right.
And there's other people that have, real issues.
Yeah. Well, there is that.
Right.
There
so
is
if you
that.
just look at that, the variability of that, and then also how that can be manipulated with exercise and all these other different things that can raise those levels up. What about the other thing, in terms of, holotropic breathing, or all these different shamanic breathing and yogic exercises, Kundalini Yoga, which I haven't experienced it in Kundalini Yoga, but I did have a very bizarre experience fairly recently on yoga where I went in a class on a pretty high dose of cannabis, and I started tripping in the middle of one of the more intense poses. It was just something akin to the very beginnings of a DMT trip, where I started seeing patterns and seeing things moving and some sort of it didn't go anywhere, but I don't pursue it in terms of attempting to make that happen.
Right.
But I would imagine that if it's made in the body and then the effects of it are reproducible when you take it. I mean, taking DMT, there's a very few people, there's a very small percentage that don't have an experience when they take it, right?
Very small percentage. Yeah.
Do we know what that number is? Is
it probably something like, I would say a wild guess,